And as far as schedule,
Welcome to the Republican Professor. This morning, we are so honored to be joined by Hunter's Blend Coffee. And with Hunter's Blend Coffee, we have Mike and Paul. Good to have you, Mike and Paul. And we got Curtis from Texas joining us, and I'm in Orange County where everybody is crazy. But
thank you. I noticed you left out my last name too, so.
And why do you think I did that, Mike?
It could have a few letters in there.
Well, I can attest to something here. Mike's last name is Schwarzentrooper, but I sometimes call him Mike Schwarzenegger because the man works out. And I thought I could bench press a lot back in a few years ago, Mike. And you took me into the gym and outdid me real quick.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Mike, I also left out Paul's last name.
That's right.
My name's Curtis. Paul Curtis. Yeah.
Oh, my name's Curtis. Oh, but that's my first name.
Well, so you guys created Hunter's Blend Coffee. How long ago did you create that?
You say about 4 years ago, Mike?
Yes, I was thinking the way origin, but yes, Hunter's Blend's about 4 years. That's right. Paul's got even the backstory to that.
Tell us where you're located.
In Mechanicsburg, Ohio. That's between Columbus and Dayton for people that know Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
What's the backstory to the 4 years ago?
Yeah, well, yeah, we can get into this, but basically 20 years ago, we started a importing roasting company called Hemisphere Coffee Roasters. And we're running, my wife and I own that. That's kind of what I would call the mother company or the umbrella of where Hunter's Blend sprang from. I love hunting.
That company
it does,
still
yeah.
Okay.
That's where that is really what's putting out Hunter's Blend product and order fulfillment, all of that. But so Hemisphere Coffee Roasters, 20 years ago, started importing directly from farmers as a way to help them help themselves. I was working for a church agency. We gave handouts. We gave money for water wells and agricultural projects and a new roof on a church building. And I was working for Rosedale International, a church organization that did church planting, but also did a lot of community projects to help the communities function better, like wells and small crop farming, training and things.
Now you're talking about in a different country, right?
I'm talking about all across Central America, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, and then into South America, Ecuador. And I saw the limitations of a handout. It's like cocaine. You get addicted to annual infusion of money. You just plan on that. And it destroys dignity. It destroys initiative. It destroys the pride of a job well done. It's just kind of is this glaze, and pastors and community leaders would line up at my little room I was staying at when I would make my annual visits and ask for money. And so the idea of Hemisphere Coffee Roasters was really born out of my master's work in missiology, study of missions. And how can a foreigner go into another country and become embedded in the life of a community, and out of that contact share one's reason for the hope within them, rather than being at a street corner kind of preaching or being an oddity in the culture. And I thought, what better way than business? You have people calling on you, you call on people, you drag your butt home at night tired, and you weren't this typical missionary. So I did a whole research out of that, and we started Hemisphere Coffee Roasters as an buying directly from farmers, doing fair business to business transactions, no gift, no giving out money, but paying fairly for coffee.
Creating an opportunity.
Yeah. But then my brother-in-laws, Ken Beachy, who's not on this, and Mike, I married Mike's sister. We would sit around Thanksgiving and Christmas every time we got together, talk about hunting, talk about our faith, talk about coffee. And I started sort of, I guess, a year before we became official, had just one blend of Hunter's Blend and trying to, I mean, my saying is coffee makes the hunting world go round. The first guy up in the morning, put the coffee on. That's just,
Absolutely.
it's the Java of that greases the wheels for, early morning, sitting in a turkey blind or a waterfowl or deer hunting. You got to have coffee.
Do you have a logo that you could show everybody what your logo looks like, your branding? Yeah, put that up there and hold it up there for a few seconds so people can
Say-
get a look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Pretty cool.
Nice. Very cool.
I grew up hunting in Colorado, and when I saw that, I was like, that is awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
You
But
were talking,
hunters are common people. They're middle America, and we get flown over a lot here with the candidates. But if you want to up your game in your taste palette of coffee, you're usually in bed with, can I say, Starbucks or Pete's or Caribou or organizations that, if they have profits, they're probably funding causes and entities that are trying to work to shut your hunting down.
Absolutely.
So why shouldn't we have our own coffee?
Mike, can I probe into a little bit of your background? You mentioned you studied missiology.
Paul, yeah.
Paul.
I did.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. So missiology is the three disciplines. It's theology and anthropology and strategy. So this is what God said about the world, about people. What's his heart for the world? And then anthropology, just how do people organize themselves and how does culture emerge? And then strategy, how might Coca-Cola get its product into an orange Fanta drinking culture? You look for dissatisfaction. You look for people who are disgusted with, there's all these indicators of change. So strategy and those three disciplines together is what is coined missiology
Where'd you study missiology?
in Simpson Graduate School. In
And
Redding,
did you get it?
California.
Where'd you get the business? Did you study business there?
No, that was, I used to work in sales for a tool store in Northern Indiana.
Okay.
But business is, I'm a dreamer, an entrepreneur about 1 out of 100 things that I think of
Mm-hmm.
may be good. And that's my wife's job to figure out which is the good idea here.
So you're the dreamer, she's the executor.
That's right. Yes.
Well, one more question on this. When you were talking about the gift thing, and I was like, okay, he's not a communist. So I was taking notes, and I was like, I thought he was a communist. All right, well, so he's
I'm
not a
a
communist.
shameless capitalist. And
So then I was like, oh wait, if he's not a communist, what is he?
yeah,
So no, but the whole thing you were talking about is awesome, what you're saying, but then the bells are going off in my mind, and I know that there's people watching this maybe now, maybe a year or two in the future that will wonder, yeah, but for business, you got to get the money to give away. You got to have the profit. And so how did you figure out, this is such a loaded question and
Yeah.
you can't answer it so easily, but I'll throw it out there anyway, because I know somebody's asking this, somebody's wondering this. How do you get that margin? How do you get that profit? How do you figure out how to make this work, not only for yourself and for your employees, but for this kind of work you're doing in the community development and all that stuff?
yeah. Well, just in a nutshell, my faith informs me that all people we're created in God's image. So if I'm working with a poor farmer who has a really good coffee crop, whatever price I spend to him has to work for him. It can't be exploiting in nature. God doesn't exploit people, but he wants us to create, and we create wealth. There's nothing wrong with the profit.
That
So,
is huge what you just said, creating wealth.
yeah.
The kids that I teach at business, I've taught in business departments for over a decade, business
wow.
public policy in Cal State, Pepperdine. And the idea, some kids get it, some kids don't. And I think a lot of it has to do with their parents, who their parents were, what their parents did, what they saw growing up. And some kids that don't get it, the Bernie kids, I call them,
Yeah.
they say, they don't understand that wealth is created. So what do you mean by that? How is wealth created?
Well, where there was none, there is now. I mean, you're taking a product and you're improving it, adding value to it. And for creating wealth in Central America, much of that is just finding markets, finding outlets for a product that they worked hard to produce. And I mean, it's
Well, that
you're a business instructor. You probably need to tell me, because I'm learning, that sometimes you're just moving pieces around, and you call, when I take an account from another roaster, and, it's like, well, I didn't really create anything. I just improved my bottom line. But when a farmer tells me 10 years after we're doing work with them that the whole economy of the community is different, that worker now has a little extra money to buy batteries, let's say for his little music player. The kiosk he bought the battery from now has money to buy rice and beans from the grocer, and the grocer now has money to buy tires for his, and that money just spins in that community, and everybody's lifted because you paid fairly. It worked for the farmer. He could in turn put inputs and hire employees and workers, but it has to work for me too. I can't get so much money in that coffee per pound that I can't sell it. So it would be ended. It would not, that'd be over. If I exploit the farmer and he's out of business in 2 years, it's over. It's gotta, so I always go in very I don't know how you feel about transparent bartering, but that's what I do with all here's what I pay for packaging, for labor, for, my overhead. I tell that to the farmer, and he tells me what his inputs are, what his labor costs, his diesel fuel, drying the coffee. And then we find a price point that works.
I really like that. I want to come back to that in just a quick second, because I think that's a really great way to lift new entrepreneurs or people that are in other levels of economy. I mean, for lack of a better term, we'll just say third world, learning how to interact with first world, high performing business. I think that what you're doing in that piece that you just said was you're mentoring them in business. And that's what these people need. It's amazing. Yeah. But I want to go back to a little bit earlier where you said the word value. I think people don't realize what value is when they're creating, when they're starting and they're being an entrepreneur, and what they're actually creating is value, and that value has a worth. They're extrapolating equity out of a situation.
Yeah.
And it's creating those channels and those connections. I'm sure you're well aware of this, that in the Christian community in particular is somewhat rampant with people that think that making a profit has an unethical there's something unethical about finding something for $10 and selling it for $20. Like you're stealing, But the reality is I found that for $10. And if you were to look for it on your own, you might be paying $30 or $40 for it. But I found a really good deal. And I was able to bring you a value by selling it less than you'd find it on your own when you consider time spent, resources spent, and I'm making it efficient. So I'm saving you time. That's, I mean, there's all kinds of values there. And then I wanted to point out one more thing where you said, maybe I'm not adding any value when I take that account from the other person, but I would submit to you that you are adding a lot of value, because that person would never have left the other person had everything been going well and smooth. And I think what you're creating there is you're establishing trust and you're establishing stability. And even if you did everything the same and didn't give him any more money, those things are valuable. And these are more, you're developing the moral world of entrepreneurship. And that is what's valuable.
Well, and there's a few points I think that will help shed some light too. These business relationships are based out of relationship. They're not just going on the open market, finding a random person. So they come out of relationship. So there's a level of trust.
Absolutely.
For starters. Another just real world practical thing is by purchasing direct, that means bypassing 5 to 6 middlemen in some cases, which that does provide that margin that you were asking about. The other thing, excuse me, is paying the farmer more for extra work, making sure that he's handling the coffee a certain way, doing these processes and during growth and taking extra time to select the better beans. So he's doing more work to create a better product for which he gets paid for. So it's a combination of all those things. So it's not a handout, it's a combination of all those things. But there's something I've been thinking about lately, excuse me, that of course we've always heard, piece of the pie. So if this person over here has a piece of the pie, that's supposedly that much less pie that's left for me. That's the lie of Marxism and humanism. And
that's a huge point, Mike. That's a huge point.
I'd like to do a study on it. But this has been kicking around in my head for a year or more. I believe that wealth, we're made in the image of God. He made this earth. He put wealth in the earth. In Genesis, it talks about this certain part of the land. That's where the gold is.
I mean, read that just this morning in morning prayer. Yeah.
Yeah. So God, and he forever talks about the great wealth in heaven, and how he's, and he owns a cattle. Wealth is God's idea. How we use it is another question. But I believe that wealth, it's either unlimited or maybe the pie is so big that we could never reach the end. I'm not sure but we're made in God's image. So create it, because we have to be. Look, the earth now has how many billion people compared to when there was the first 100,000, and yet we're all doing incrementally better. And if we could export freedom and free market to these countries that are just barely, living below poverty all day, they would advance it as well. It's not, if they advance, then we have to decrease. Obviously that's a lie, but I think this is a whole other subject. But I believe that wealth is unlimited because of the creativity that God put in each one of you and each one of us, that we have his image stamped on us. And anyways, that's a whole other subject. But so every time something new is created, there's a great book. It's called Economics in One Lesson. I don't know if it's an old book.
Oh yeah, Henry Hazlitt.
That's an amazing book, but it kind of covers some of that. Like when the guy making buggy whips and the automobile was invented, he couldn't sell buggy whips anymore. But yes, that's a great book. Oh, he's still around.
Does that book have pictures in it? Because otherwise I can't. I got rid of all my books that don't have pictures.
It doesn't have one picture in it. Oh, man.
Well, that's
Sorry.
why I threw it away. I don't have any Bibles anymore because I was like, where are the pictures?
They sell children's versions.
There you go.
Mike, can I ask you, did you grow up hunting?
Yeah, when when I was 13, that's Ken, the other partner, married my sister, Twyla, and he took me under his wing and taught me how to trap. And I was just caught up in the outdoors and stuff. And I didn't hunt a whole lot. I mostly was more of a trapper when I was through high school, and did some hunting, but I always stayed in contact with it. And I just loved reading, and used to get Outdoor Life as a kid. And so
Me
not a
too.
lot.
I got Outdoor Life too.
Oh yeah, this happened to me and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I've always stayed in touch with it, especially with family and brothers-in-law. And then where I got really active in hunting, my son, when he was in 6th grade, so that's about 10 years ago, he got interested in archery, and I started getting him lessons. And then that's when I got bit with the archery bug. And so I've been archery hunting ever since then.
Very cool. Very cool.
Paul, did you grow up hunting?
I did. I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania, hunting. First day of deer season, school shut down. You couldn't buy gas. Everybody's in the woods, teachers, students. And we went to school with shotguns in our back seat because we were going to hunt pheasants on the way home. And in
How
that
many murders were in your high school?
Yeah, there wasn't any.
Well, how's that work? Wait, hold on
I
a
know.
second.
Right.
We have to
Yeah.
micromanage everything.
Guns are violent.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't we have to take away freedom from ordinary law-abiding citizens in order to ensure that people don't get murdered?
Right.
That's
Exactly.
the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to our conversation about creating wealth. I have a couple of interns that I engage usually each year, and I talk to them a lot about, and I would say this to any of your listeners, I think the secret of tapping into God's creativity and unlimited wealth is becoming good at something. Get the degree, get the internships, get the skills you need to be really good at something. And maybe alongside of that, find out where a problem is in the world and take your skill set now from a creative position and address that problem, and you will create wealth. You'll create a need for yourself. And
along those lines, right now we have a lot of problems that are already solved, that but that are being used, kind of like Mike was saying earlier. I think it was Mike who was saying it. The profits of which are being used to advance problems, a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of opportunity here in front of us to have good people solving the same problems that are already being solved, because those good people need to be supported.
Yeah. Yeah.
Straight up, just two economies. Just that's how we can.
Well,
Fight against
we're
getting a
trying.
little
No, it's fine. I wanted to get into a little bit about, Mike answered exactly the question I was asking about margin. You said that you cut out the middleman. How did you end up doing that? Where'd that idea come from? Did you see somebody else do that and you're like, I can do that? And how did you feel confident enough to where, because I imagine this meant you went to Central America yourself, right, to establish relationships, or am I missing something?
so let me address that, because that's the mission. I took, starting probably 25 years ago, I was working for the mission agency. I was traveling to Central America, Indonesia, East Africa, mostly developing countries. We had expats, we had American missionaries there doing a variety of things. Central America and South America, we pulled all our foreign workers out, and we were just relating to the national churches that had emerged. There was 80 churches in Nicaragua, 35, 40 churches in Costa Rica. And every year I'd go down and visit them. But I would take about 25 years ago, I started taking businessmen and women on study tours. How can we really address the misery and the poverty that's in this? What are answers? And the answers, I think, would work in downtown Chicago. The left has created misery in this country. There is a misery, whether it's addiction, welfare.
Other countries too.
In other countries,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
So most of the countries I was working in were either dictators or had just a lot of limited ownership, title rights to property. It was sketchy. So the study tours basically came out. There is a buyer going to the farmer buying wet cherries, just fresh fruit. That buyer is selling a truckload of cherries to a processing mill. That mill is working on getting 2 containers to a buyer they have. That guy buying the 2 containers has 10 containers headed for Germany. The Germany importer needs 100 containers to do a Folgers account or something. So all those intermediaries were putting 25 to 40 cents a pound. So the farmer is getting 70, 80 cents, and the coffee is $3.50 a pound up here because all the intermediate. And I had a internal revenue auditor with me one time, and I said, Andy, we got to find the money. Where's the money? And we talked to farmers. We talked to the Heffies or directors at the mills. And then we talked to the National Ministry of Agriculture Export, and they all would say different things. And basically this auditor said they're all lying. They're all protecting their source and their contacts. And what we need is just an entity up in the States just buy direct from the farm. That was 20 years ago when we started doing that. And there was, like in Costa Rica, is almost like 5 or 6 cartels that ran all that export. But it was just when it was beginning to emerge, there's got to be a better way for farmers to get a better price for their coffee. And so for $35 in Nicaragua, I got my farmer an export license. I registered him with the USDA, FDA here in the US. I became the importer, he was the exporter. And we started doing that. And that really was at the front edge of what we call direct trade movement. And it's big awesome now.
That's
but
huge.
20 years ago, there was nobody doing it. Brokers up here who bought coffee, these big companies, they said, you can't do it. You cannot go direct. You're going to get screwed. But as Mike said, that's the power of relationship. Amen. Here's Diego, who I've walked with in my church ministry work with him. And he's got 300 acres of coffee. And he makes 4 containers a year. And we start importing those direct and paying him now 2x, 3 times what he's ever seen for coffee before. And it just changed his whole life. There's teachers now in the school on his farm. There's health clinics, there's women's clinics, it's a whole different community.
And are the people there, are they connecting the dots as far as, this isn't our leftist government helping us. This is actually American business people.
Yeah. And it's not a handout. Diego's got a lot of hard work, like Mike said, to sort the coffee and send us the best.
Yeah. I meant like, are they connecting the dots between the work? They have an incentive, in other words, to do high quality work or ensure you're happy. Yeah. They make you happy. They make the American customer happy. The American customer has the deep pocket.
Yeah.
The deep pocket will flow the money down to them where they need it.
I've enjoyed setting up a projector in a building and letting the workers come see shots of us pulling espresso and lines of customers, giving them, they just get these big eyes. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And
That's really
it's
smart.
amazing.
That's really
People
smart.
who were born in poverty, their grandpa was poor, they're poor. They sort of have this idea that the gods or God, if I'm working in Indonesia with Muslims, it's the God, must have overlooked us. You know, they have this almost bring on this persona that
That's
we're
really
less
sad,
than
man. That
everyone
is
else.
really
Yeah.
sad.
But when I link arms with a farmer and say, dude, you make wonderful coffee. Let me just tell you one little story. Diego Chavarria, who we get a lot of our coffee in the Hunter's Blend in Nicaragua, has 4 brothers. And we were all together. My first time to their farm, the brothers were there and Diego, and I said, what's your coffee taste like? And they all looked at each other. We don't know. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're coffee farmers and you don't know what your coffee tastes like. They said, our dad taught us you sell everything. And then what was left over was so bad, we don't drink it. And I noticed on their breakfast nook was a can of Nescafe, instant.
Wow.
And I'm like, you guys drink instant coffee? Yeah, but we don't like it. But our coffee that's left over is so bad. And so we went to the mill, got some of their coffee. I brought it up. I had a little roaster heat gun with me. I roasted 30 grams, ground it up. Gloria brought a tea kettle off a boil, and I did a little pour over for him. And I took that cup and I said, here, Diego, you take the first drink. And he takes this sip. I'll never forget. His eyes got big and these big old tears rolled down. He said, that's wonderful coffee. I said, dude, you make good coffee. And it just to be joint partners in business rather than top down, I think it's brought a lot of dignity. And that's what we're trying to do. God always restores what was broken.
Yes.
And it's broken in developing countries. And in downtown Chicago and Columbus, it's broken.
Yeah. This is moral entrepreneurship at its finest.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All entrepreneurship is moral. That's a lot of people miss that.
Mhm.
The regulation mindset, the regulatory mindset, to run awry. I mean, some regulations are necessary, obviously, but the mindset that there has to be some kind of central authority that ensures everything about your life, and is what's destructive to the kind of value approach that you're talking about that actually works.
Mhm.
And like I tell my students, you know, as much as the New York City government wants to control things, for example, there's no commissioner of lunch in New York City, and yet millions of people get lunch somehow. Amazing how that works.
And they all
There's
like
no
it.
centralized
Yeah.
bureaucrat of lunch that makes sure everybody gets lunch. It's amazing. People
Hmm.
come together spontaneously. They notice a need and they try to figure out their relationships and contacts, and yeah, there's some regulations to ensure health and safety, but if it goes beyond that, it's destructive to people. And finding that balance is really the hard work that people don't want to do, or they don't know how to do, I guess, maybe. But that's a beautiful story you mentioned there.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
let me go one step further. You know, health and safety. I think even safety is become almost as God today.
Yeah.
Yeah, people come in here, safety first, safety first. And I've told Mike already, if it had been safety first, the founding fathers would have never started a crazy idea of America.
Mhm.
Safety first. Where's risk? And we've done, every time we buy coffee and finance it, and we do 3-4 containers a year, I've got probably in a warehouse $500,000 of other people's finance coffee. You know, the future, we got to keep selling coffee. And so there's times I don't sleep well at night, but it's not safety first. It's not all calculated out. There's risks. And willing to walk with farmers in their risk. Yeah, so that's kind of where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I cry every time I hear that story about Diego drinking his own coffee, but it's so powerful. There's a hidden gem in buying direct that we kind of stumbled across in Hunter's Blend. It wasn't, as you know the story behind it, just buy direct because of what it can do for the farmer and up here. So, but even if a company was, say, pro Second Amendment or pro hunting, or a patriotic constitutional company, and that's who the company is that roasts it and sells it, when they're buying off the open market through the U.S. importers, there's a pretty good chance that the U.S. importer reflects pretty much what you see at Starbucks or wherever. They're going to have a similar mindset.
They're based out of Long Beach. They're based out of Seattle. They're based out of Portland.
Yeah. So their discretionary income, if you're a patriot and a Second Amendment guy, may be going directly to work against the Second Amendment, limiting your right to bear arms, or your right and freedom to hunt. And so hidden there in plain sight, we realized, whoa, we're doing this other cool thing that's pro-American, pro-hunting, is bypassing that negative underbelly of coffee and going to the farmer. So not only as the roaster and distributor of the coffee are we, patriots and constitutionalists and hunters ourselves, we've also bypassed a negative part of coffee being the importer. So it's really from the farmer to the cup. It is pro-American, freedom, pro-hunting, pro-Second Amendment, because that's who we are.
Do you have that written down somewhere, that little thing you just said, from the farmer to the cup, pro-American or pro-free? Actually, pro-freedom would be better, but
I'll write that down.
actually they live in America too, the Central Americans.
Yeah.
But
well, they do. I like using America anyways. Yeah, just because.
no, I mean, I totally get it.
But
I totally get it. But I think your heart is that you would like other people in other countries to enjoy what we take for granted. Sometimes we take for granted, and that these poor folks that are struggling under conditions that are in many ways created by government policies down there, or culture, that harms individual rights, right? The right to make a living, the right to defend yourself effectively, their right. What Second Amendment right do they have? They don't have any Second Amendment down there. So, I mean, they don't even have it north of the border in Canada.
Right.
And they're more similar to us in terms of the Anglo-Protestant culture that we inherited from our English ancestor, at least legal ancestor, not racial ancestor. But it's interesting that the angle that you have there, the constitutional or natural rights, however you want to cash it out exactly. The concern is for human rights, for real people, and the struggles that they have just to live in the world. And those are the same concerns that people in Ohio have. I mean, we're talking about basic human rights.
Well, I think you guys would know this, I'm sure, better than me. I think it was John Locke that talked about, that's where we got our phrase life, liberty, and we called it pursuit of happiness. I think the original, though, was property, if I'm correct. And I understand some of the reasons why they didn't put property in there, but ultimately that's really, if we could import or export those life, liberty, and property, that is life changing.
The liberty part alone is
yeah,
sometimes really hard for people to get. Like, I mean, I think we saw it the last couple of years with all this stuff, like what Paul was saying about safety first. I really loved how you put that, where I couldn't help but think about the last 2 years
Yeah.
about I seeing people out here in California with masks on at the beach.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the beach. There's 3,000 miles of open ocean,
Oh,
and I've seen this with my own eyes. It's a Seattle mentality. It's a left coast mentality, but it's fake. And I see it in my students. It's a fake. Once you cut through it a little bit, take that top fake part off, underneath is some common sense that's afraid to come out. It's afraid because it's afraid of social judgment. It's there. It just takes a little bit of work and say, it's okay, come on out. But I'll tell you what I noticed on the beach, that when we were there on sunset, the sun's going down. And then as the masks start coming off.
wow.
It's
Wow.
because of social judgment. So they are
Wow.
afraid of being judged. It's
Yeah.
not that they really believe that it's
Right.
safer at night for the virus. They don't really believe that. They're not even thinking enough to like link what they're doing with belief, but it's about social pressure. And you know, the direct buying, is there any regulatory issues that you have faced that get in the way of that? Trying to think of what it was like when I was a kid. It seems like there was only Folgers. There was like Winchell's coffee when you went to Winchell's. But when I was a kid, I don't remember Starbucks or coffee shops that you went to for foo-foo coffee.
Yeah.
That came about a little bit later, at least in my development. Curtis, do you remember any of that when you were a kid?
No,
Coffee
I
wasn't
mean,
like a big thing it was just
No.
like normal
all
coffee.
through high school, it was when I got to college that I started discovering that phenomena of Starbucks, you know.
It's like beer, all of a sudden there's like every kind of beer imaginable. Where'd all this beer come from?
Yeah.
Back when I was a kid, it was like Pabst Blue Ribbon. It was like Coors Light
Yeah.
and, you know,
Coors Banquet.
Michelob, but it was
Yeah.
like, it wasn't like the variety that we have now. Now it's same thing with coffee for different reasons, obviously, because you can't just make coffee in your like basement. But you know, how do you explain that? You guys are,
Well, I mean, they say turn of the century, 1900, 1910, you had little community roasters. The woman of the house would go down to her neighborhood, maybe bakery but roaster, and get their bag of coffee for the week. And so some green coffee brokership was established. But the big in 1920s, pre-World War II, you had these big brands established. And certainly after World War II, the government fed coffee to the GIs and just coffee, coffee, coffee. And when they came home is where, this is what I understand, all the labor laws began to include, you need a coffee break at 10, coffee break at 3, a coffee break. They say as the World War II veterans came home, the wives were looking at them like, what is this coffee thing? Coffee. Why do you got to have coffee? And it really, the big brands flourished. And it just I mean, Starbucks, for all I call them $4 or $4, and, you know, for all the negatives that one can say about Starbucks, one thing they did, they brought the idea of coffee as a product of place. You started seeing Sumatra. Wait a minute, I thought Folgers, Arabica, 100% mountain grown Colombia, but they started doing Costa Rica, Sumatra, Tanzania peaberry. What is this? Is coffee, you mean not? So the brands would take thousands of locations and farms and fincas and beneficios and co-ops and blend it into their national brand. Starbucks maybe branded the country, the origin, the farm. And so for that, I'm grateful for them. They opened that up. But then another wave, we call it the third wave of coffee, came in behind that and said, wait a minute, coffee can tell us how it wants to be roasted. If we just burn it like a Seattle taste, what's the difference between a Costa Rican and an Ecuador? It's huge. If you light roast it, you start getting nuances of berries and lemon and different mouthfeels. And so that's kind of where we are today. And it's hard for a and we also know coffee has a decreasing shelf life. So it's really tough for a big specialty coffee to do it right nationwide. And I think that's always going to have the regional roasters and state roasters. I mean, we ship coffee all over the country, but after 6 weeks sitting on a shelf in California, I'm not proud of my coffee. It needs to be consumed before that.
Paul, what were you like in college? Were you like in your drinking your coffee and you were like, this has got notes of elderberry?
No. No, it just my donuts were on the bottom of the cup. I was dunking my donuts.
But when did you become really, either one of you, was there a time when you were like, I'm sick of this crappy coffee? Or
that is a good question, because I kind of, in traveling to for Rosedale International, the ministry, I would be in Central America drinking wonderful coffee up in the highlands. In the valleys where all the cities are, San Jose or Managua, they're languishingly hot. So when you'd want to do a retreat, the pastors or leaders would have it up in the mountains at a retreat center. Well, that's coffee zone. And we'd be drinking wonderful high altitude coffee. The higher it's grown, the harder the bean. The harder, more dense the bean, the more interesting the flavor. The higher it's grown in the mountain, the more difficult the labor is to extract it. So to get really good coffee it's a miracle in that we can actually get it off of that remote mountain by mule. And here we are, at least I am, drinking it.
For me, it was an acquired taste over the years, because before it would have just been whatever's at the store, or, back when it was like, oh, did you try that hazelnut? That's so good. That was about my level of coffee. And then as Paul and Grace were roasting and I started getting their coffee, I'm like, it totally changed for both my wife and I. It changed our appreciation of coffee, and it became, you realize, oh, there's a lot more to it than just coffee. And so it's been over a period of time of drinking fresh roasted. I tell people it's kind of like, you can go to the store and buy a tomato, or if you grew one in the garden, you let it ripen on the vine, you bring it in. It's a whole different fruit altogether. It's like they almost aren't the same. But I was thinking too, this, as you were talking about the beer, and it's like, it's the same for coffee. I don't think Budweiser is hurting at all, but there's, like you said, 1,000,001 other more smaller or local or craft beers out there. So it didn't, the craft beer or the local brewery didn't necessarily, I'm sure there was some effect on Budweiser or whatever brand. And yet what it did was it expanded. It expanded people's availability, people's taste, people's appreciation. Same with coffee. So it's not, I don't know, it taps back to that thing. I wonder if wealth is not unlimited, and then due to the creativity that God and wealth that he put on the earth. But anyway, those expanded brands just meant expanded opportunity for people.
Yeah.
One of you, I think, Lucas, you had asked about regulatory. Their coffee has a bit of a favorable status to import to the 48 states because we don't grow coffee here. So there's no duty, and just a lot, of course, it's easy to hide drugs in containers of coffee, and there's some of that, but by and large, I've found containers get through the ports to the rail to Chicago and then trucked to me very smoothly. That's not a problem. It's at the roaster level, the FDA and some of the clean air. I remember back right after Trump was elected, my FDA inspector came in and he said, you know, everything I've talked to you that you got to do. Yeah. He said, just forget that. You don't have to do it. And it was things like getting a paper trail of liability. So if I sell coffee to an account and somebody drinks that coffee and dies, they can come back to me. Then I got to go to the farmer and have a release from. I told this guy, I said, okay, here's a guy 2 hours out of the city in a little community. You drive off into a 2-track, 19 kilometers up to his farm. I'm going to hold him liable for some. That's just not feasible. Well, you got to do it, you know. And then our roastery had to have reclaim the smoke and burn it off, and that all went away. They walked in last fall, and it's all back. So I don't know where we're going with that.
Yeah.
I'll tell my- Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say, keeping in mind, it's smoke from a organic product. You know, it's, you know, as far as the reclamation goes, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a plant.
I would be curious. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, I would be curious to know what, if any, issues you've had in country as you've expanded and, in theory, taken away some growers from some of the larger, maybe cartels or larger, you know, cartels, really.
My biggest issue right now is in northern Guatemala. We're working with, and I think I can say this on this podcast because there's a lot of forces at work. But
Sure.
in northern Guatemala, there is a cartel, and it's a German coffee company that sits there, and it actually has sally ports or outside fences and in gates where the farmers, which are mostly Kachin Indian, they're a very proud, but there was a people movement for Christ among that whole mountain ridge. And these Kachin people are believers, but here sits Düsseldorf coffee. And the farmers bring their cherries, drop them. They don't know what happens. They don't know what they're making. They're growing cherries, delivering it, and Düsseldorf is extracting those profits and just ripping them off for decades. Well, I went in about 4 years ago, and I'm working with an expat, an American who's living up there in Coban, Guatemala. And I mean, when I'm there, we're actually stay off the street during the day. I mean, it's bullet in the head potential.
Wow.
Because you're messing status quo. You're messing with the way it's always been. And at night we go out in the street and go to a restaurant and stuff. But so that was the weirdest thing I've ever. But for the most part, the governments are sympathetic. They realize maybe their main agricultural export. We've got to make sure the farmers, you know, can sustain the next generation. So there's two sociological problems happening right now in coffee. And I'm not parroting this. I've seen it. I've also read about it, but it's the graying of coffee. So the kids are saying, I do not want the life that my parents had. I've seen them work their fingers to the bone, and grandpa, and they'll go to the city, get an education and get a job in banking or graphic design, or they're not coming back. So I'm seeing an older and older producer. But also another factor is the feminization of coffee, where the men go to the cities for work, come home weekends, and the women are left with the small children on the farm to do pretty heavy work. And when the men are in the city, there's mistresses, there's other families emerging there that they don't know about each other. And it's just causing a social issue, morality issue, and particularly Nicaragua, Honduras, some of the more poor producing countries that I've talked to people back in the mountains, when was the last time you were in Monago? Never been to Monago. It's a 3-hour bus ride. So it's a whole different life. It's a whole different world in the city than back in the mountains. So we got to pay fairly. It has to work for the producers, and the whole big brands are getting pushed. They're going to have to start buying better coffee, because farmers, if there's no money in it, why would they do it?
What I hear you saying, you guys, is that what you're bringing, the genesis of this company is not just a love of coffee, although that's probably like the main thing, right? But it's a heart for these people. It grew out of mission work. That's how you had the relationships and the knowledge base of this unique area, or these unique areas that grow coffee. And then an appreciation for the expertise that business people bring. That's why you brought them over there, to figure out how we can make this work, how you can make this work for them and for you. And you also have a love for freedom, because that's how you see the world. God created the world. We're created in the image of God. Everybody, Americans and non-Americans, have rights as bearers of image of God, and dignity, and sometimes their socioeconomic status and the horrible overbearing government control and regulation that crushes small business, crushes initiative, and crushes the ability of people to have hope that they can make a living apart from dependency of the government. That's driving the mission of your company, Hunter's Blend, right?
Well said.
So I think that's a good reason. Tell us about your products. What kind of products do you have? How do people get in touch with you? How do they find you?
Yeah, we sell most of ours online at huntersblendcoffee.com.
Okay, we'll link that.
So we've got a dark roast we call black powder, and it's about as dark as we can roast it. Like Paul was saying, you roast something too dark, you're just going to burn off all the notes, and it just kind of burnt. So it's as dark as we can make it while still retaining nice flavor, nice notes. It's a nice bold. One of our running jokes is you don't need creamer to drink Hunter's Blend coffee. You don't need to edge off those sharp notes. And then our original roast is what it is. It's the original roast that was designed. It's like a medium, maybe dark side of medium. Then we have a light roast, Dawn's Early Light. And then we've got a flavored option too. It's called Java Rum. Our decaf is a medium roast. It's the Nicaraguan coffee. And a lot of times with decaf, for whatever reason, coffee companies will use the cheap coffee, as though people that drink decaf don't care about the flavor. Well, that would be literally the only reason to drink decaf, because it's not going to keep you awake. So but it's often decaf gets a bad rap. It's like horrible coffee. This is really good coffee. It's a lot of people will say, I don't taste the difference. And so, yeah, but you can get all of that. And then we've got our, merch on there, t-shirts and stuff made in the US. We got a made in the US ceramic mug on there, as well as other gear. The stainless steel, the double-walled stainless steel stuff, I don't know of a US manufacturer like our double-wall stainless mugs and tumblers and stuff. Unfortunately, I'm hoping through all of this stuff or supply chain issues that somebody's going to start thinking about more things that can be made here that's currently imported. But
be awesome.
Yeah, huntersblendcoffee.com.
Curtis, did you have anything that you wanted to pop in there?
No, I mean, it would be nice if we could get some more American manufacturing of those things. I just have loved meeting you guys on this podcast and hearing your hearts and visions. Clearly, we're aligned in a lot of things, and I love that. I want to see us have you guys. I'd love to have you guys on again and talk about more things. and promote your company. What we need are good people starting companies, working companies, and coming together and supporting each other. This is good.
Yeah.
Great stuff, guys.
Well,
I
we
really
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And
My
I
pleasure to get to meet you guys.
we want to help educate people about the challenges that businesses face, how businesses come about, what's the point of it? Why can't just the government do everything? And just, try to for people who want to know, it's there. This will go into an archive. It'll be there for years, Lord willing.
Yeah.
I don't think we said anything that's going to get us censored, but who knows, the powers that be, but the Lord willing, this will go into an archive for years and years, and people can keep checking it out all around the world. It's public. So we'll share this. We'll link your website where people can find out information and find out how to contact you. And we look forward to having you guys on again at some point.
Sounds good. Have a great day.
Great to meet you. Yeah,
Awesome.
bless you guys.
Take care.
This is the subscription only extra credit part. We're talking about fair trade regulation and policy. What does it mean to be fair trade coffee?
Yeah, a lot of people ask us about, oh yeah, I drink fair trade coffee. Is that what this is? And really nothing could be further from the truth. With the fair trade program, what a lot of people don't realize is farmers are limited to 10% of their coffee can even be put in the fair trade program. But out of that, to get that fair trade designation, it puts a lot of extra work, paperwork, cost, time for the farmer to do that. And the amount more of increase that they get paid on that fair trade percentage is very minor. Their joke among the farmers is fair for who? Because they realistically, they don't see it. There's been articles written that I think it was, in one case, they figured it was an average of $28 a year, I think, that the farmer made more. So it's probably a great idea, but when it's done from a governmental or regulatory approach, top down, it just doesn't, unfortunately, pan out to the farmer. And then there's a whole quality thing too that Paul knows more about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that you touched on something, Mike, the word fair. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but the word fair trade is translated almost like justice or just. And I often get it when I ask, how has fair trade benefited you? The farmer, he's looking around, seeing who's listening. Nothing. The Hefe or the director, he got new tin on his roof, or he got a new car. The premiums that were paid from fair trade to the co-op very seldom trickle down to the farmer. And if they do go to the farmer, here's what's going to happen. I might walk up to the farmer and say, and he knows I'm coming, I'm here to buy coffee. He sorts off 10% of the worst coffee to give to the fair trade buyer because there's no quality check. And he has me check his best coffee. So my deduction from that, and I don't think I'm wrong, I've looked into this a lot, is that fair trade coffee on the market in the US is the worst coffee the producer can produce, because there's no, it's just, you poor guy, you need a little more money. Nobody's ever done that to me. They say, produce something good and I'll give you more money.
That explains so much of my experience with fair trade coffee just as a consumer.
Yes,
Mm.
yes.
I never am impressed with it. I'm always like, okay, all right. But
So there's a real benefit to fair trade, a real benefit, and that's for the American consumer to feel good that their purchase is somehow helping somebody. It's a little bit like the little
that's really
Christmas
huge.
sign around here, Santa Claus, just believe.
Just
Well,
that's
well,
huge.
now wait a
In fair
second.
trade, just
There's a-
believe.
There's another benefit, and that's to the company who's getting a higher margin because
Yes,
they're
indeed.
selling that
Yeah.
for way more
Yeah,
than the rest of
yeah.
the coffee.
Yeah, it's under delivered, oversold.
Yeah.
And this may step on a few toes, but the reality is that reminds me a lot of organic coffee.
Oh,
We get
yes.
that question a lot, is your coffee organic? Well, one thing a lot of people don't know is any agricultural product being imported into the US by the FDA is required to become fumigated when it lands because you're going to have spiders and
Oh,
maybe snakes
no.
hitchhiking.
I see
So
where
that-
this is going.
So even if it is organic, it's all literally fumigated.
It's not organic anymore.
Yeah.
But there's no chemicals in the fumigation, right?
Right.
No,
It's just
correct.
water,
But-
right?
There's people working on food grade fumigation. It's like, come on, it doesn't exist at the moment.
But the quality too, Paul, I remember, your input on the quality of the organic coffee because of a lack of availability to use fertilizer, what
Yeah.
it does to the coffee quality.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you look at a handful of beans that were organically grown, they've got, we call them broca in Spanish, they're little bug bites. And at the right time of the flower season, early May, throwing a little bit of granular fertilizer helps that plant be strong to get it through that phase of flower to cherry.
Mm.
And if you're organic, you're not doing any of that. So you've got crop that is undeveloped but less production. And then a little spray at the right time takes care of the broca.
Mm.
And again, it's not like just covering it. I remember Diego told me a story. He said, I one time, a production seminar he went to, said, you need to spray, like crazy. So he said, I got the spraying equipment and I put my guys out there. They came in that night, we'd take 2 to the clinic because they weren't breathing right. And he said, right then I decided I'm going to take care of my farm. I'm going to take care of my workers. We're going to do a little fertilizer. We're going to do a little spray, but we're not, so that's kind of the mentality. Plus, Diego, actually the last 3-4 years, money's been so tight, he's not had any inputs. And he learned to take a cup and you put a little yellow grease up in the cup and you hang it on the plants, and the male bug is attracted to that yellow and gets stuck. And there's alternative methods for insect control and they're learning. But yeah, generally organic coffee is either not organic. Diego every year has a half a dozen buyers come to him, say, I want to buy coffee, Diego. And he said, well, aren't you organic buyer? Yes, but like I said, I need coffee. So I don't know, because once it's roasted in 600-degree air, this was Michael Savitz out of Corvallis, Oregon. He was a chemist. He did a lot of research in the 80s on traditional grown coffee and organic. And in the test tube after roasting, going through all that heat, the allergens, any chemical on or in the coffee was burned off. Could not find a difference in a lab. So I don't know. It is, again,
Does that mean the
A sales
fumigation
site.
chemicals, that are there?
well,
is-
if
that
it
they're
was
burned off?
grown with fertilizer in origin,
Mhm.
they cannot find the uptake in the bean after it was roasted.
And
Let
yeah,
alone the fumigation is burned off too.
yeah.
This raises so many interesting issues about regulation, and the regulation always is meant well.
Mhm.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, the Russian Revolution that led to 70 years of Soviet tyranny for tens of millions of people and murder, by the way, that all was meant well.
Sure.
We mean well. You don't understand. We mean well. And the same with anything, I mean, anything that where government has too much of a place. My Bernie kids, I tell them, you're concerned about the 1%. And they're like, yeah, well, the 1%. I said, do you know who the 1% really is? It's the government. The government owns 85% of Nevada.
Hmm.
Trump owns 1 block. Who's the 1%? You know, the 1% is a multiple trillionaire, also in debt, but you know, also has nuclear weapons. So I mean, you know, Trump doesn't, you know, I mean, so they're not used to thinking of the government as an actor, as an owner of property, as an owner of bank accounts, banked, heavily banked. And it's easy for them to not consider that. And it's so weird for me. Why would you not consider that? It's like the biggest elephant in the room, the government.
Yeah. Wow.
And you have to think of how the government affects your life. It's not like the government can do whatever it wants. Why is that? Why would that be the case? That's a theory of government, that the government is sovereign, not you. And you're seeing this in places like Canada, for example. That theory is exactly on display, all over the world. Who's really in charge?
Yep.
Does the government get to do whatever it wants to do simply because it exists? It's a theory of government. You got to have a theory of government. Ours is spelled out in our founding documents, that it's the people that are in charge. The government does not have rights. It has powers delegated to it by the people. And if you get those backwards, then you're always going to get confused.
Yeah.
And the FDA, it's not like the FDA is over there going, what can we do good today? No, they have a mandate from the people. And sometimes that mandate is not very well thought out. Like what you were talking about with the FDA when Trump came on, and you mentioned it was just basically a bunch of paperwork and bureaucracy, and it was just passed on to the consumer for what? I mean, who is standing in line to buy coffee, or who's online ordering your bag of coffee really worried that they're going to die?
Yeah.
And I just need to know who I can sue in order to die. If I die from this cup of coffee, I mean, well, I mean, so anyway, we really we're barely scratching the surface, because you guys know so much. And so thank you for joining us for this little extra tidbit.
Thank you.